the world stood still as King Charles III made an emotional confession during a surprise palace broadcast, announcing he would be stepping back from royal duties effective immediately. What followed wasn't just unexpected, it was history in motion. For the first time in modern monarchy, Princess Anne was appointed regent, leaving the nation in stunned silence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. There had been whispers, yes, but nothing that prepared the public, or the palace, for what unfolded in the span of 9 haunting minutes. In a pre-recorded address aired simultaneously across national and international networks, King Charles III appeared visibly emotional but composed. He began with a simple phrase, "There are things I must say, and burdens I can no longer carry." What followed was less a speech, and more a quiet unraveling of a monarch's heart. Charles spoke of unseen pressures, of regrets that had grown heavier with time, and of a haunting realization that the role he had waited a lifetime to inherit had become a crown too sharp to wear. He did not blame anyone. He offered no timeline for return. Instead, he invoked duty not to power, but to truth. And with that, declared his decision to step back indefinitely from all royal obligations. The moment that followed froze the room. In a soft but firm voice, King Charles named Princess Anne, his sister, his confidant, and his fiercest defender as regent of the United Kingdom under royal protocol. No warning, no leaks, not even a nod to his direct heir. In a monarchy built on legacy and tradition, this was a rupture in the line of succession not seen in generations. Across the country, reactions were swift and visceral. Crowds gathered outside Windsor and Buckingham, not in protest, but in disbelief. Social media ignited with shock and speculation. Was Charles ill? Was there more he hadn't said? And what of William? Why had the crown bypassed him entirely? What lingered most, however, wasn't the announcement, it was the final line. Spoken in a tone only a few degrees above a whisper, Charles ended the broadcast with, "Some truths, once faced, demand that we step aside before they consume the whole." Then the screen faded to black. No anthem, no signature, just silence. It was this final sentence that sent the palace into lockdown and the public into frenzy. What had he meant? What truth had demanded his retreat? And why now? Behind the regal facade, something deeper was unfolding, something that would force the world to question what power looks like when it breaks. But to understand the weight of this moment, we must look at the private storms that have long raged behind the palace gates. She was never meant to rule. Overlooked for decades, Princess Anne stayed loyal, silent, and steady. But now, with a shaken king and a fractured family, the forgotten warrior has become the monarchy's final line of defense. In a royal household plagued by scandal, ambition, and whispered rivalries, Anne remained the only constant unyielding in duty, immune to spectacle, and untouched by public indulgence. While her brothers courted headlines and heirs navigated the balance between legacy and modernity, Anne buried herself in service. She never asked for attention, and perhaps that's why the institution began to depend on her in ways no one could publicly acknowledge. Her appointments soared. Her overseas engagements outnumbered any other royal. Yet even as the public began to notice, the palace remained silent. She wasn't in the line of succession. She wasn't, by tradition, a threat. Until she was. Her exclusion from the throne had long been accepted as the product of history's shadow, a relic of outdated gender laws that left her behind despite her unmatched devotion. But inside the palace walls, it became increasingly clear. Anne wasn't just respected, she was feared. Not for her power, but for her clarity. She had no interest in pageantry, no appetite for PR battles. And as Charles wrestled with a crumbling legacy and William vanished into silence, Anne was the only figure left who could command both reverence and results. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but courtiers began speaking in a different tone when they referred to her. One described her as the last spine left standing. Another whispered, "She knows more than any of them, and she's not afraid of what comes next." Behind the scenes, Anne's influence had already begun to surge. Decisions once left to the king's inner circle were subtly rerouted through her council. It was Anne who diffused a quiet diplomatic dispute with Canada just months before Charles's confession. Anne, who personally handled the fallout of a leaked letter from a disgraced staffer tied to Camilla's office, and Anne, who, according to one insider, was the only senior royal willing to meet with aides loyal to Harry despite what that might suggest. Days before Charles's address, a secret meeting took place between Anne and the Privy Council, convened at her request, under the guise of estate affairs. But multiple sources now confirm the truth. It was an early rehearsal for a transfer of power. Courtiers noticed other signs: a reshuffling of security teams, a rare visit by Anne to the Queen's private archives, and most telling of all, the absence of protest from those who normally pushed back. The palace, in its own discreet way, had already begun preparing her, not for power but for protection, of the crown, of continuity, of what was left. And in the end, it was Anne who had never reached for the throne who was chosen to hold it steady when it began to fall. But what broke Charles's resolve so completely that he handed power to the one sibling least concerned with titles? He waited his whole life to wear the crown, but he never imagined the cost. Sources close to the king reveal sleepless nights, family betrayal, and a crisis that pushed him to the edge. For decades, Charles bore the weight of expectation. As heir apparent, he navigated scandals, endured scrutiny, and quietly prepared for a role that promised dignity but delivered devastation. The moment he ascended the throne, the world celebrated a transition, but behind the gilded gates, a storm had already begun. The royal family, fractured beneath the surface, began to splinter even further. Tensions with Prince William deepened behind closed doors as the two clashed over future strategy, visibility, and control. Some insiders claim their relationship became purely ceremonial, strained by unspoken resentments and diverging visions for the monarchy. Then came Camilla, once Charles's greatest ally, now a lightning rod for division. Her growing assertiveness and reported attempts to expand her influence within the household only heightened the internal unease. But perhaps most destabilizing were the whispers of illness, circulating not in tabloids, but in diplomatic corridors. Quiet inquiries made by foreign dignitaries, cancelled appearances attributed to fatigue. There was no official diagnosis, but those closest to the king saw it in his eyes: the hesitation, the heaviness, the growing distance. His speeches grew shorter, his days quieter. And then, without warning, a palace aide anonymously leaked a series of journal entries allegedly penned by Charles in the months following his coronation. The writings revealed a man unraveling beneath the pressure. One line, reportedly scribbled in the margin of a late-night entry, read, "What good is legacy if it devours the man who carries it?" The true breaking point, however, came in a place no one expected: the royal chapel. According to two independent sources, Charles called a group of senior staff together just before dawn, 3 days prior to his public address. In the soft echo of stained glass shadows, he stood before them and delivered a confession. He spoke of the toll, the silence, and a haunting sense that his reign had become a performance devoid of peace. He ended with a quote, words said to be taken from a final conversation with Queen Elizabeth just weeks before her death: "Protect the crown, not yourself." That line, spoken decades ago in love and wisdom, had now become a command Charles could no longer ignore. He understood at last that to protect the crown, he would have to let it go. What began as a gradual descent had become a sharp, painful collapse of resolve. The king, worn down by betrayal, pressure, and legacy, no longer saw himself as the solution, but the burden. And in that moment of surrender, a choice had to be made. Someone had to hold the line. Someone outside the noise, the scandals, the bloodied battles for power. Someone who didn't need the crown to serve it. As Charles crumbled under the weight of the crown, Princess Anne was already stepping into the role no one expected, but someone had clearly prepared. No cameras, no leaks. Just 12 men and women behind locked palace doors, and a decision that would alter the monarchy forever. This was the meeting that activated the regency. In the hours following King Charles's unprecedented confession, a crisis protocol rarely touched since the days of constitutional uncertainty was quietly enacted. The Royal Regency Council, comprised of the most senior political and royal advisors, was summoned before dawn under the shadow of absolute discretion. The meeting wasn't ceremonial, it was decisive. There would be no debates aired in public, no royal press briefings to soften the blow. The urgency was unmistakable. The Crown could not afford a vacuum. And as the nation held its breath, the monarchy did what it had always done in times of peril. It made a ruthless, calculated choice behind closed doors. By 3 a.m., a confidential document was signed, sealed, and witnessed, naming Princess Anne as the temporary regent of the United Kingdom under constitutional clause. Her appointment wasn't symbolic, it was legal, binding, executed with the full weight of Crown authority. And yet, the decision was far from unanimous. Inside the room, Prince William reportedly voiced his opposition not out of ambition, but concern. Some claimed he questioned the optics. Others believe he feared being sidelined during a moment when his future role as king should have come into focus. But Anne didn't wait for consensus. Her message was clear, her voice described as cold and unshaken. This isn't about blood. It's about survival. There were no rebuttals after that, only signatures. And then came Camilla, or rather the absence of her. The Queen Consort, a figure never shy of visibility, was nowhere to be found. Her chair sat empty throughout the session. No explanation was offered, but the implications were heavy. Had she chosen not to attend, or had she been excluded? The whispers intensified immediately, some suggesting that tensions between Anne and Camilla had quietly reached a breaking point in recent weeks. If true, the Queen's absence was not just symbolic, it was strategic. A silent war unfolding just beyond the public gaze. By sunrise, the newly drafted Regency decree was placed into the Windsor archives, marked with the King's personal crest. A separate sealed copy was sent to Downing Street, and one to the Archbishop of Canterbury. The monarchy had moved swiftly, deliberately, and with unmistakable clarity. For the first time in modern history, the crown had passed not to an heir but to a sister forged in silence and steel. Anne emerged from the session without a single comment to press, her expression unreadable, her authority now unquestionable. But while Anne took the throne in duty, others saw an opportunity and began plotting around her in silence. As the crown shifted unexpectedly, one figure went silent and another resurfaced. Prince William vanished from public view. In the days following Anne's appointment as regent, the public expected a swift response from the Prince of Wales, a rallying presence to reassure a nation still reeling from the king's withdrawal. But instead, William pulled back. Scheduled engagements were postponed. A speech at a veterans' memorial was abruptly cancelled. No official reason was given at first, until a brief statement from his office cited a period of personal reassessment. Behind the polished language, the truth was unmistakable. William had been blindsided. According to one senior aide, the heir had no idea that the regency was coming, or that it would bypass him entirely. The silence wasn't just strategic, it was wounded. And into that silence, Meghan stepped. With the monarchy in transition and media attention spinning out of control, the Duchess of Sussex released a carefully timed video message from California. It was brief, poised, but unmistakably provocative. "Every story has chapters unfinished," she said, her eyes steady. Some close with grace. Others wait for their reckoning. That line ignited a firestorm. Was it a veiled reference to Charles's abdication? A challenge to Anne's new authority? Or a signal that the Sussexes were preparing to re-enter the arena they once walked away from? Within hours, the press exploded with speculation. Royal commentators dissected every word. Former palace insiders warned that another media war could be on the horizon. Simultaneously, a bitter debate reignited over titles, inheritance, and royal legitimacy. Should Harry and Meghan's children retain their birthright? Was Anne now in a position to formally review or revoke dormant honours? And where did William stand in it all? Publicly, he said nothing. Privately, sources claim he was devastated not only by his father's decision, but by the speed with which power slipped from his hands into Anne's. One family aide leaked that Catherine, Princess of Wales, had urged Charles not to go through with it, concerned that the blow to William's credibility would be lasting. But Charles had reportedly stopped responding to messages in the days before his speech, leaving even those closest to him in the dark. Adding fuel to the fire, Harry's team began teasing an unfiltered, sit-down interview with a major US broadcaster, promising revelations that will contextualize recent decisions made across the Atlantic. Though no air date was announced, the mere hint of another Sussex media moment sent Buckingham into defensive mode. There were no public denials, no direct confrontations, only tightened security, revised talking points, and nervous glances toward Montecito. With William silent, Charles absent, and Meghan once again drawing the spotlight, the monarchy was spinning in too many directions at once. And in that storm, Anne understood one thing with terrifying clarity. If the institution was going to survive, it could no longer afford to play defense. As the family fractures deepened, Anne tightened her grip quietly, removing barriers from the royal machine. She didn't need a crown to command a kingdom. Behind the scenes, Anne began recalibrating centuries of royal tradition, one brutal, calculated move at a time. While headlines focused on Charles's retreat and William's silence, the true transformation was unfolding in quiet corridors under Anne's watchful eye. The moment her regency was activated, she moved swiftly, not for spectacle, but for structure. The first step was internal, an immediate and sweeping review of palace staff. Dozens of roles, long protected by tradition rather than necessity, were placed under scrutiny. Departments that had grown bloated under ceremonial excess were streamlined or dissolved entirely. Several senior aides, once considered untouchable, were reassigned or quietly released. It wasn't vindictive, it was surgical. Anne wasn't out to punish, she was out to prepare. Next came the ceremonial protocols, rituals and events that, for generations, had served no purpose beyond optics. Under Anne's directive, many of these were scrapped. Weekly walkabouts were suspended. Certain balcony appearances cancelled. Even royal carriage processions were shelved indefinitely, deemed out of step with current expectations. Some in the press accused her of stripping away the magic, but those who understood the monarchy's internal machinery saw something else. Anne wasn't dismantling the crown, she was fortifying it, and one of her boldest moves came when she suspended all of Queen Camilla's upcoming public appearances. No explanation was offered, no substitute names provided. Just silence. The message was unmistakable. The spotlight would not be shared until the institution was steady once more. But the most controversial move came with Anne's decision to commission a confidential audit of the royal archives, an unprecedented order in recent history. The goal was clear: to review all documentation tied to constitutional precedent, financial entanglements, and any correspondence that could threaten the stability of the crown in the months to come. For this, Anne turned to a group long ignored former advisors of Queen Elizabeth II, quiet, sharp, and loyal to the memory of a monarch whose reign had been synonymous with control. These men and women were brought back into the fold, offering insight not as servants of power, but as custodians of its survival. And then, without ceremony or fanfare, Anne made her most telling move. Sensitive responsibilities, once overseen by Prince William, including certain diplomatic briefings, security briefings, and succession planning, were reassigned, but not to William. To a small team quietly assembled around Prince George, it wasn't an elevation, it was preparation, a shift from present uncertainty to future continuity, and it spoke volumes. William's role had become politically complicated. Catherine's absence from major functions was becoming more noticeable. The monarchy could no longer afford to wait. Anne had seen enough. But Anne's rise didn't just alter palace dynamics. It exposed royal truths long buried beneath marble and myth. Buried in a sealed envelope, locked away in Balmoral, was a directive no one was meant to see until crisis demanded it. It was signed by Queen Elizabeth, and it named Princess Anne. For years, this document was little more than a myth among senior courtiers. A quiet rumour that the late Queen, ever the strategist, had written a confidential instruction to be opened only under the most severe constitutional uncertainty. That moment had come. During the palace's internal transition audit ordered by Anne, the sealed envelope surfaced in the Queen's private desk drawer, unmarked on the official archive registry, but clearly addressed to the Privy Council. What lay inside was not a resignation plan, nor a contingency for abdication. It was a personal, handwritten directive, outlining the Queen's wishes should the monarchy ever find itself in a moment of fractured leadership and public doubt. And at the heart of it was her daughter. The language was firm, yet laced with unmistakable affection. Elizabeth didn't name Anne as heir or successor, but she did something more deliberate. She named her designated protector of continuity, a phrase with no official standing in royal law, yet heavy with symbolic force. She explained, in elegant yet commanding prose, that while tradition may point to bloodlines, history favours those with composure, resilience, and unwavering loyalty to the institution over themselves. The most haunting line read, "She carries steel where others carry titles." The document also revealed something far more unsettling, an expressed doubt by Queen Elizabeth regarding Charles's long-term fitness to rule. Though respectful in tone, the late monarch hinted at concerns over her son's emotional fragility and his tendency to become consumed by the role rather than centered by it. It wasn't a condemnation, it was a warning, and while no one could have predicted the exact shape of the crisis now unfolding, the Queen's marginal notes, written in her own unmistakable script, spoke volumes. One note, circled in red ink beside the final paragraph, simply read, "If she is needed, you will know." The envelope, once opened, triggered an immediate protocol chain. A certified copy was hand-delivered to the Privy Council just 3 days before Charles made his televised confession. The timing was no coincidence. Palace insiders now confirm that the document helped guide the Council's swift endorsement of Anne's regency. What once seemed sudden now felt orchestrated. The Queen hadn't just hoped Anne would rise, she had prepared for it, and in doing so, she rewrote the unwritten rules of royal destiny. The revelation sent ripples through the monarchy and the press alike. Some heralded it as a masterstroke of foresight. Others whispered about what else the Queen might have prepared but never revealed. Either way, the message was undeniable. The crown did not stumble into Anne's hands. It arrived as a final act of a monarch who had always seen further than the rest. The Queen may have foreseen the storm, but no one could have predicted what would happen when Anne finally sat in power. Within 24 hours of her appointment, Princess Anne made a decision that left allies stunned and enemies scrambling. The new regent wasn't here to preserve the old order, she came to end it. What unfolded next wasn't gradual reform, it was swift recalibration. Anne, long regarded as the monarchy's most disciplined operator, wasted no time asserting her command. Her first order, issued before dawn, froze all scheduled royal foreign tours pending review. It was a direct challenge to the tradition of royal diplomacy, and it sent immediate shockwaves through embassies, Commonwealth offices, and palace departments alike. Those tours weren't just ceremonial, they were a lifeline of influence. But Anne didn't flinch. She knew symbolism had become a crutch, and crutches don't rebuild broken empires. Next, she revoked several controversial royal patronages, titles, and partnerships, handed out over the years more for political favour than purpose. Among them were causes championed by Charles and Camilla, now publicly scrutinised for blurred lines between royal endorsement and personal legacy building. Anne, ever the pragmatist, made it clear. Only institutions with measurable public impact would continue under the Crown's name. The blowback was immediate. Some charities released carefully worded statements of disappointment. Others leaked letters expressing deep concern over Anne's methods. But behind palace walls, there was no hesitation. The regent had drawn her line and dared anyone to cross it. Then came the audit order. For the first time in royal history, an internal inquiry was launched into the financial records of Charles's charity ties. This was no symbolic gesture. It was a forensic-level review, conducted by external auditors with no royal allegiance. Though the results have not yet been made public, sources close to the investigation confirmed that inconsistencies, conflicts of interest, and questionable accounting methods were already under scrutiny. Whether Anne intends to make those findings public remains unknown, but the move alone signaled a tectonic shift. The age of internal secrecy had ended. International reaction was swift and divided. Several Commonwealth nations, already disillusioned with the royal institution, demanded clarity. Leaders in the Caribbean called for full transparency from a monarchy long entwined with colonial legacy. Behind closed doors, diplomatic relations grew tense. The U.S. and EU issued cautious statements acknowledging the regent's right to restructure, but urging stability. Foreign analysts debated whether Anne's regency marked reform or revolution. What had begun as a family drama was now a global recalibration. Meanwhile, the media became a battlefield. British tabloids split into two camps: those who praised Anne as a wartime regent, and those who warned she was dismantling the royal identity piece by piece. Editorials in global outlets questioned whether this was the future of monarchy or the beginning of its end. But if Anne heard the noise, she didn't respond. She didn't need to. Every move she made spoke louder than a headline. And as the world recalibrates around a new kind of monarchy, one final act threatens to reshape the line of succession forever. As her final act in her first week as regent, Anne sent a sealed order to the royal archives, one that could alter the future of the crown. What she proposed stunned the inner circle and broke centuries of tradition. The monarchy had seen abdications, coronations, and coups of silence, but never had it faced this: a living sovereign, a silent heir, and a regent who dared to redraw the future while the ink on her appointment was still drying. At precisely 7:46 a.m., an official petition personally signed by Princess Anne was delivered to both Houses of Parliament, requesting an emergency review of the line of succession, not to remove a monarch, but to future-proof the institution. Her language was precise, cold in parts, but cutting in its implications. It didn't name William explicitly, but it didn't have to. The document outlined a scenario in which the reigning monarch is incapacitated or steps back, and the direct heir is otherwise unwilling or emotionally unfit to bear the strain of regency. In such a case, Anne proposed a conditional bypass, allowing the throne to temporarily pass to the next heir in line if Parliament deemed it in the national interest. That heir would be Prince George. The reaction was instant. Some insiders called it unthinkable. Others called it genius. Because behind the legal phrasing lay something deeper, a quiet reckoning with William's silence, his absence, his refusal to step forward in a time of fire. Sources close to Catherine revealed her heartbreak. She had stood beside William in shadow and in storm, but this was different. She was said to be devastated but understanding. Her loyalty remained with her husband, but her protective instincts had begun to shift toward her son. And that shift would soon become visible to the world. George's private schooling schedule was quietly revised. Special tutors were brought in under diplomatic cover. Lessons on statecraft, ethics, crisis management. Not in decades had such steps been taken for a child not yet a teenager. But Anne's vision was clear. She wasn't waiting for fate. She was preparing for battle. And not the kind fought with crowns and cameras, but with legacy, survival, and truth. What truly shattered the silence was a leak. A single line, copied from the final page of Anne's sealed note, released through an unnamed aide. He deserves a future, not a battlefield. No signature, no clarification. But the message was unmistakable. Anne had made her move not as a sister or as a daughter of the Queen, but as regent. She had chosen continuity over comfort, stability over sentiment. And in doing so, she may have permanently fractured the royal order. And now, as a nation adjusts to its unexpected regent, one question haunts every room in the palace: will King Charles ever return? Or is this the age of Anne? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.